All right, back at it again. So, when it comes to Silicon Valley and the pioneers who have made this place a hub of innovation, it comes with that question that you mentioned, Vinod Khosla. Now, this Indian-born engineer who came to the Valley, graduated from Stanford University, and co-founded Sun Microsystems, is today highly sought after for his thought leadership in this space as the billionaire VC who has funded and backed many disruptive companies from all over the world. So please get up and give a resounding welcome to Vinod Khosla.
It's great to be here every year.
Thank you, guys. So we have the wonderful, awesome, and incredible Vinod Khosla. Today is a really special treat for me. I shared with him backstage that I made a list of 6 people when I moved to the Valley that I admired and someday wanted to meet. And today I'm proud to say I can complete that list of 6. So
I'm honored.
So what I'd like for you to do is kind of start out by telling us a bit about how you see inventing the future and the responsibility. Do you think the responsibility lies with the general population, or do you think that this is something that's uniquely given to the entrepreneur?
Well, I think all innovation depends on very few people driving change to happen. And we were talking a little bit about which industries, where's innovation happening. It's everywhere. So if I look at it, you may have a list of 6 people, but I would bet the following. Of the 6 people, I've most likely screwed up and failed more times than any of the others 5, right? And innovation depends on people trying things, and trying things means trying hard things, otherwise it's not innovation. Most interesting things in life involve taking risks and doing things that you don't know how to do, that are hard to do, stretching yourself, and so being willing to fail. That's a unique breed of person, and innovation won't happen unless some entrepreneur takes it upon them to be passionate about an area and make that change and make that innovation happen.
So how do you encourage entrepreneurs who, naturally are risk takers, to not focus so much on the mistake or the failure?
Well, look, whenever you're doing something new, it by definition means you don't know the space super well. So the more open-minded you are that you're in this journey of discovering what the real issues are, what the real problem is, the better off you are. And taking risks where if you fail, you can do something, you don't die.
Right.
Failure doesn't matter if it doesn't kill you. So you keep learning. And you learn the fastest. I sometimes say you try everything till you finally figure out the only solution left, that's the right one. So I'm a real fan of experimental trial and error kind of approaches to learning, having a good sense of business, thinking it through, but assuming then that you don't know. One of the reasons traditional industry people don't innovate in their industry is because they have too many assumptions on how the world works. GM spent a lot more money than Elon Musk on the electric car, started years before him, but they had too much knowledge about how things worked. Same thing every time there's a healthcare startup. Those people know just so much. They put on blinders about everything else that's worth trying. It's why Walmart didn't reinvent retailing, Amazon did.
Right.
It's why NBC didn't do media, Twitter and Facebook and YouTube did. So no large innovation comes out of people knowing the industry really, really well. Maybe there's some exceptions, but by and large, traditional companies don't do innovation.
I know you said last year here on stage, you were talking about the healthcare profession specifically, and you said that when you're dealing with a healthcare startup, the one thing you don't encourage your founders to do is go hire healthcare professionals. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, what I said is I hate healthcare startups that have a healthcare CEO. Right? It's okay to hire a few people who tell you about all the things that could go wrong. It's valuable to have that kind of critique of your strategy so you can account for it. It's not something you ignore, but it doesn't deter you from doing things and fitting into the old mold. Otherwise, you will fit into the old groove the way things are already done.
And do you think that's true only for healthcare, or is that just applicable across all industries?
It's true of healthcare. It's true of automotive. We know it's true of space because Boeing and Lockheed didn't do rocket launches.
Right.
We have a really interesting rocket launch coming up next year in a company in New Zealand that we have next month, sorry. Not next year.
Month.
I hope it's not next year. Yeah, in
Pretty much
every
industry,
it needs an outsider's fresh perspective to not say this is how things are done, but to ask the question why, and why can't we do it different? And they'll be naive. And so some degree of naivety about an industry is actually very healthy as long as you're asking a lot of questions and learning a lot about why people haven't done it differently.
So what would you say to Vinod circa 1984 about what innovation means, today?
To me, the biggest thing that matters for all of you entrepreneurs is picking something you're passionate about so when things go wrong, and they will, you don't give up easily. You keep your vision, I'd like to say be obstinate about your vision and the change you want to bring and make happen. Almost religious adherence to that so you don't get distracted or give up. But be flexible about your tactics. As one thing doesn't work, you try a different experiment or a different one. So agility and sort of rapid learning and thinking and trying small experiments. Will this work? Will that work? That's what I encourage everybody to do. We were fortunate to have that opportunity without realizing that's what we were doing. But it's
that
great.
was the first experiment, right?
Yes.
So would you say that team building versus groupthink, talk a bit about how that ties into how an entrepreneur ultimately takes those experiments and turns them into success?
Yeah. So my favorite quote I tweet sometimes saying a company becomes the people it hires. It doesn't matter what your business plan is. A business plan is good to sort of look at the quality of your thinking, but it's not a good representative of what you will actually end up doing. So mostly I ignore business plans other than to judge the quality of the entrepreneur, not as the plan they will follow.
And so when you look at the team composition itself, how much of the team composition would you say for entrepreneurs lend to what you would call groupthink versus, and does groupthink either aid or abet innovation?
So I think what's really important in building a team is, and like I said, if an entrepreneur builds a great team, they'll build a great company. And great means not only great at the tasks they do, and sometimes entrepreneurs will want to hire their friends and they have very similar backgrounds and very similar thinking. I think in addition to agility, moving quickly and learning quickly, diversity may be the single most important thing. If you're innovating in an area, hire somebody from outside that area. It's okay to hire a few people from that area, but that diversity of thinking, that diversity of experiences you can assemble will dramatically change the outcome of a startup.
So even if you're building, say, a very high-tech startup, when you say diversifying your team, how far outside of an industry or would you say is safe to get the type of innovation?
It really doesn't matter how far outside. What matters is how the person thinks. So let me, there's a blog I wrote probably 5 years ago called Engineering the Gene Pool of a Startup. I think it was on TechCrunch, and it's also on our website. Right? And I talk a lot about how to engineer the gene pool, and there's another blog on how to hire people in areas you don't understand. Both are really important, I think, for entrepreneurs. But when people hire a marketing person, first, the founder, never having done marketing, usually doesn't have a good idea what a good marketing person is. They have a pretty naive view of that. So it's important to say, how do you evaluate that person? But one of the important questions I ask entrepreneurs to think about is, if you're hiring this VP of marketing, will they make your VP of engineering better? And a good lead for that is what kinds of questions they'll ask.
That's interesting. One of the things I've learned as I've evolved as an entrepreneur is that both marketing and engineering really have to work very well together. Without that, you have a great product that no one knows about, or either everyone knows about a product that doesn't exist.
Yeah, but the point I was making was slightly different.
Okay.
If you're hiring a senior team member, they should be able to do their function. A marketing person should be able to do marketing. But they should also make every other senior member of your team much better by the quality of the questions they ask. If the right questions get asked in sort of a staff meeting or a group meeting, you will have a better startup. And you want to have those questions asked directly and considered before they hit you and say, oh shit, I didn't think about this. It's much more expensive when you have to go, oh shit.
Right. So what would you quantify the cost of oh shit?
It can be 6 months or a year or two. The number of times people get clarity about what they really want to do when they're running out of money, it's amazing. And sometimes you'll get that second shot, and sometimes you don't. Now, why does that happen? Because as you start to run out of money, you ask a lot more questions. You question your assumptions a lot more. And you test them a lot more. And you can do that ahead of time if you have the right culture. But when you're running out of money, you're forced to do that.
So do you think desperation basically aids in innovation?
Somebody was very wise to say necessity is the mother of invention.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So what do you find the most interesting?
What I'd say is
this is Vinod. Vinod leads the conversation. Yeah. We love it.
Hey, I have all these things. What I like to say to entrepreneurs is sometimes when you raise more money, your probability of success actually goes down. I really believe that having less money forces you to test yourself, especially the first couple of years of a startup, forces you to think much harder about what you're going to do, what you want to spend money on, what you don't want to spend money on. There's a thing called not spending enough money or not hiring the right team, and that's a mistake when people do that to save a little bit of money. And there's a thing called spending too much money or raising too much. The more comfortable you get, the more likely you are to fail. Also find that people who've been successful before tend to be too overconfident about themselves and have a lower probability of asking the hard questions, the critical questions. And so, not everybody, but it lowers the probability of success when you have overconfidence.
So are you dispelling the serial entrepreneurial myths?
No, I'm not. I'm saying be very, very of assuming you know a lot about a new space. Be very inclined to say, I'm going to learn as quickly, talk to as many different points of view, consider them, not necessarily adapt them, because somebody who adapts everything they hear is likely to be confused and fail. but examine them critically and say, this is my point of view, I'm going to go try it.
Well, I think the audience should feel really great for those of you who are entrepreneurs and don't have a lot of money. You're right where you should be. That's great. So when you think about advising startups and entrepreneurs on how they remain on the cutting edge of their industry, sometimes we see as companies grow and get bigger, to your point, they begin to slow and not be able to be as agile as they were as a startup. What is your advice to entrepreneurs on, as they grow and become medium-sized companies and even bigger, how to maintain that same type of agility?
You know, and I suspect a lot of entrepreneurs here wish they had that problem. Get so large they're bureaucratic. But it's always about the team and the culture of the team asking a lot of questions and questioning many things, not only in their area, but in other areas of the firm, and pushing each other. Andy Grove wrote a great book in the 80s called Only the Paranoid Survive. And even when Intel in the 80s was big and successful, they were still asking these critical questions. I still recommend this book called Only the Paranoid Survive. It's a great book.
I'm going to jot that down because I need to read that book too. So given that, you were influenced heavily by what you saw Intel do and ultimately moved into building Sun Microsystems, being that early entrepreneur, how did you approach people giving you this exact same advice?
It's so far back, I barely remember. So it's easy to reconstruct a different memory of it.
Revisionist history?
No, but the fact is, the thing we did really, really well is build an awesome team. In the first 15 people, we had Bill Joy and Scott McNeely and myself and Andy Bechtelsheim and Eric Schmidt, and I think Carol Bartz. I think about 10 billion-dollar companies came out of the first 15 people we hired. Wow. In retrospect, that tells me we just hired great people. I had a habit of just enjoying great people and going after them relentlessly, whether they wanted to talk to me or not, and selling them hard on joining us. You're a small little thing. If you think about it, I sold Bill Joy and Andy Bechtelsheim both to drop their PhDs to join me.
Wow.
They both felt they were only months away, but convinced both of them, and selling is a big part of what an entrepreneur does. But it's risky. I mean, somebody's going to change their career. For some 20-some-year-old, trying to convince them to embark on this journey.
Well, I'm sure they thank you today.
Today, they're happy.
Well, part of, like you said, being an entrepreneur is being that salesperson. And being a salesperson, you help those who don't see from your perspective. So as an entrepreneur, how would you encourage them, even as they're experimenting and figuring out exactly what their products are? Maybe you don't exactly know yet, but how do you guide them on convincing others to join?
So I always encourage people to, one, build great teams, build diverse teams that don't necessarily agree with the founders. That's really, really important. It's so easy to fall in love with people who love your business plan and say, hey, I love that. But then they're not adding any value to you. If they're making you think hard about your plan and challenging assumptions with good questions, they can be bad questions. You don't want those people. There's people who want the world to work like it has in the past. They want to extrapolate the past, not invent a new future. But people who actually ask you questions that make you think about your plan, make you change your plan, change your hiring plan, those are the people you want on your team constantly. So sometimes entrepreneurs, and there's probably many in the audience, say, hey, I'm not looking for venture funding, and I don't suggest you do this to me, but do it to all the other VCs. Go meet them to see if they want to invest. Whether you want money or not, getting honest critique of why somebody doesn't want to invest is one of the best learnings you can do. It's, again, an entrepreneur who collects the best questions to get answered will, in the end, lower their risk and increase their probability of success. And so look for people to critique you, not people who are hypocritically polite and say, oh, that's great. They'll waste your time, you waste your life. People who critically push you to think hard and challenge you. And I find too many people in the venture business are hypocritically polite. I'd rather be brutally honest and tell you the things I'm worried about, concerned about, push you. My view is an investor's job is to push an entrepreneur to think hard and then back off and let them make the decision. So
that deserves a hand clap.
Right. People are too nice and they don't tell you what they see and they're not honest with you and they make you feel nice, but they're risking your future. My view is the exact opposite. In 30 years, I've never voted against a management team on any board to the point where now I don't even go on boards because it's pointless. If I can't convince an entrepreneur of something, then we should do what the entrepreneur wants. Last night, I was having a thing with the entrepreneur, and I said, this is what I think you need, but hey, it's your company, go do it. But I'm not going to spend a lot of time if I disagree with you, because I've been doing this for 3 years trying to convince him, and which is fine. Entrepreneurs should follow their vision and passion, because doing what an investor tells you is exactly the wrong thing to do.
I heard you
But
say
you should
before.
take that challenge. You should think hard, not have people who are polite and nice to you. So I will, if I'm ever an investor in one of your companies, my job is to push you with hard questions, make you feel uncomfortable, help you build a team that will challenge you and the rest of your team. So that is a very critical role, and sometimes you can get it just by outsiders, but mostly you have to push people to be brutally honest and give you real feedback.
I heard you say before that when dealing with boards, that you never vote against the entrepreneur, that if except for in one instance, which you know. But so talk a bit about the transparent support of the entrepreneurial decision, just in general.
Look, I know we're running out of time.
Oh, we are, wow.
But I'm happy to take more time. I have time. What I would refer to people to is a blog I wrote that's, again, I think it was in TechCrunch, and it's also on our website called What Boards Should and Should Not Do.
Interesting.
I have very, very strong and detailed views of what boards should and shouldn't do. And most of the time, I find I'm much more useful to a company if I'm not on the board, because people are too formal with their boards because boards are voting on things. I don't believe a private company board should ever have to vote on any issue, period, other than maybe the one exception is when there's management discord, you sort of have to resolve it. And so do you vote on the CEO as the leader or not is an issue sometimes there's no choice on.
So do you see the board as being really just more like a support and a guide more than a decision maker?
Yes. The board should never be a decision maker in a private venture-funded company, never. Whether selling a company or not, take an important decision. Should we sell the company? It should be the team's decision. Should we not take an offer? That should be the team's decision.
So how do you attract board members who are acclimated to being a decision maker to become a part of your team?
So, that's a hard thing. Here's what I would say to entrepreneurs. You want people who are guides, but you want people on your board who will push you and ask these questions. Because the more questions you get asked, the less expensive it will be for your startup later. Other than that, there really shouldn't be a function other than helping you recruit people. So when you're recruiting somebody, You're an engineer starting a company, you hire a VP of marketing, you don't know how to judge a marketing guy, your board members should be able to help judge that. So recruiting is something we should absolutely do. I know last year or the year before, I think Derek asked me, he said one of the other VCs told him that there's no way Vinod spends that much time recruiting. I absolutely was blown away that they think I don't spend 30% of my time recruiting. The two things I've done this morning before I got here were entirely weekly recruiting calls for a company that's trying to recruit.
So do you teach other board members how to follow your methodology?
You know, not my job to teach others. Partners in our firm, we talk a lot about what we should do to help entrepreneurs. What's actually helpful, what increases the probability of success, and helps a company.
Absolutely. Well, I can tell you that board members help early stage startups really gain credibility when it comes to investors. So both being a board member and an investor, I think your insight is very poignant, and entrepreneurs don't hear that nearly enough. I think entrepreneurs in the audience would agree. So tell us a bit, hand clap right there. We don't hear this nearly enough. So tell us a bit about, moving from the board member itself, going back and focusing on the team. How do you get the team to become a true team of rivals? Because sometimes, to your point, that you bring on the people who you've known, historically gone to college with, that you've worked with. How do you make it okay inside of a company to draw swords with each other?
Look, there's not everything, board members or investors or advisors can't do everything.
Right.
Much of it depends on the entrepreneur. So when we invest, we bet on the entrepreneur. Having said that, if an entrepreneur is having an issue, when an entrepreneur starts out, they don't have experience growing a company, usually doing all that. There are other entrepreneurs in our portfolio who went through that 2 years ago or 3 years ago. So networking them and say, hey, why don't you go talk to that person on what they wish they'd done 3 years ago? Or they had the similar issue. That network and knowing who went through what issues. If you're having a team issue of too much questioning or not enough questioning, there's probably 3 people I'd refer you to and say, hey, go talk to them and see how they handle it. And also sometimes, hey, that company failed. Talk to them what they wish they'd done in retrospect. And some ways, those examples and that experience, especially when you have multiple opinions, is very, very valuable and very helpful. And it's one of the biggest things an investor can do for you is guide you to talk to others.
So tell us what you think are the most interesting emerging industries that entrepreneurs either are working in currently or that you see are on the horizon.
So I think every industry is up for innovation and renovation. We can dramatically change almost everything we do. I'm always surprised at the plans we get. Like I mentioned, we're doing a rocket launch in New Zealand. Probably cut the cost of a launch by a factor of 10 to 50.
Wow.
Okay? And they're doing 3D printed motors and electric turbochargers, things that have never been done in designing rocket engines. At the other end, in Redwood City, we have somebody has 80 scientists and engineers working on designing a hamburger. Now, who would have thought, I wouldn't have listed hamburgers as open to renovation. Before Elon Musk worked on Tesla, I wouldn't have thought automotive industry was open for renovation. We have an entrepreneur, Blue River Technologies, doing robotic weeding in fields. That's in the John Deere business of tractors. But if they succeed, they eliminate herbicides from these crops. That's a massive contribution and a massive market. Right? If you eliminate herbicides, you free up genetics of crops because Monsanto and others have a lock on the herbicides, and so they can control the genes and monetize them and play tricks like you can't plant the same seeds again. So whether it's agriculture or food, we have a number of Hampton Creek's doing an amazing job with eggs, Impossible with burgers. We have a robotic hamburger making company called Momentum Machines in the city. Rocketry. It just every area I look. I love housing as an area. I love 3D printing and manufacturing as an area. I do think there's a lot of room for innovation in manufacturing. So we're doing a lot of fundamental new technologies in 3D printing and applications of that. We have a little company doing custom shoes. Take
Wow.
three pictures of your shoe, and they'll custom print a shoe for you. Exactly.
And what's the time frame for delivery?
They're actually delivering small quantities now, but we can talk about that later.
Yeah.
My point is, there's so many areas. Robotics is really, really interesting. Healthcare is an area I'm spending a lot of time on. Robotics plus AI, healthcare plus AI, financial technologies plus AI. Those are all really, really fascinating areas. But what I would say is almost any area you look at is open for innovation, and there's examples to prove it. And so, nothing's out of bounds for entrepreneurs.
So what would be the one piece of advice that you would leave with the audience about how they can get involved in disrupting an industry like the auto industry that no one ever expected disruption?
Yeah. If you're building a small team, if you're building a team to build a small company, you probably know how to do it better than I do, and I'm the wrong advisor for you. If you're disrupting a big company, a big area, there's nothing you can do. You'll never have a good enough team. My one piece of advice, you never have enough good people. And so any good person you find, no matter how different and diverse they are from the experience you need, if they're awesome people, go hire them. You will not go wrong with hiring great people, even if they're not immediately relevant to your startup. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.